What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today we're going to be taking a look at the New York Giants offensive line at this point in the offseason. Of course, we still got the upcoming 2023 NFL Draft. The Giants might address a couple positions on the offensive line through the draft, but right now, we just want to talk about the offensive line, our confidence level in each position from left tackle to right tackle and everything in between, and discuss what our expectations are for this unit heading into the 2023 season. Again, still time to make some upgrades, make some improvements across the line, but right now, as things stand, I am a bit skeptical over this offensive line and as to whether or not it can be a competent enough unit to get Daniel Jones where he needs to be. So let's go ahead, Alex, and without further ado, kind of dive into it, discuss. But before we do, make sure you leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. But Alex, how are you doing today, and what are your initial thoughts on the Giants offensive line?
Well, as we know, the offensive line has been the kind of chink in our armor for a very long time, and we're still trying to develop it. We're still trying to get this unit to be an above average line. And we know that once we get there, Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley will benefit the most. And we took a big step forward last year. There wasn't any major significant changes, and Evan Neal was really bad in his rookie season. I mean, objectively really bad. And unfortunately, we're kind of sitting here is he going to take that big step forward? Now, I do believe he will. Apparently, he's been working on a new stance. He's been really diligent about his work ethic this offseason to improve. So I'm expecting a better season from him and during his sophomore campaign. But at the end of the day, it's all what ifs until proven otherwise. And, right tackle was a major liability last year, but I do feel as though that will end up being a stronger position for us. Obviously, Andrew Thomas is a top 3 left tackle in football. And that is obvious, and that is true and factual. So we know that left tackle is situated. Now, the interior 3 positions are ones that are kind of still up for grabs. Left guard, I'm still high on Josh Ezeudu. I do think he can develop into a nice player. Of course, 4th round pick he was last year. Really good feet, good hands, just needed more experience. Coming from UNC, he wasn't going up against some of the best teams. I mean, they went up against some pretty solid teams. They got Marcus McKethan as well, ended up tearing his ACL. But, transitioning to a pro-style offense and, becoming a focal point is really difficult. And for a guy like that, 4th round pick, more of a developmental piece. Remember, Matt Pert was a 3rd round pick a couple of years ago out of UConn. So ultimately, he needed a season at least to kind of get his bearings. And, the injury he suffered after the midway point definitely hurt his growth and development. But I do think that he's a very solid player, and he's got really good run blocking qualities already. I think in terms of pass protection, that's where he's going to have to really improve. But Josh Ezeudu, I think, should be right in the mix there for a starting job, as well as Ben Bredesen, who they're saying could transition to center. And for what it's worth, the center position should be addressed, right? I am not even putting a cent into Ben Bredesen or Shane Lemieux taking over full-time at center. We need to go out and get ourselves a Tittman, a John Michael Schmitz. There are so many really great centers in this draft class, and I'm sure as hell the Giants are going to be looking for a starting level guy immediately, and I think that should be a priority for them. But I'll kind of let you get your 2 cents in here. I want to talk about kind of each individual position, each individual player we have on the roster now. But, what are your thoughts about right tackle? Start there with Evan Neal. Do you think he's going to take that big step forward? Obviously, last year, he was the biggest liability. I think he gave up 10 sacks, maybe more than that. So he was a big problem for us. We were always trying to supplement that. And if he can kind of get better and win those 1v1 battles more often than not, it's going to help this offense improve pretty significantly, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you said you wanted to start with right tackle, because that's exactly where I wanted to start. Because I think when you look at the Giants' offensive line, we all feel confident in left tackle Andrew Thomas. But as we get across the offensive line, the number one position that needs to be better in 2023 is the right tackle position. Now, part of that is because the Giants obviously invested a pretty valuable asset into that right tackle position. They went ahead with the 7th overall pick in last year's draft and selected Evan Neal. So when you're looking at Evan Neal, the rookie season that he had, it was really, really poor. He had a bad year. He would be the first person to tell you that. The two of us sitting here on this podcast, Alex, criticizing Evan Neal, we are absolutely valid. Evan Neal criticizes himself every time he does an interview because he knows he was really poor as a rookie. So going into his sophomore season, we're hoping for an Andrew Thomas turnaround, right? That's what we all want to see. But we've said that about a lot of players before. Just give him 1 to 2 years, and they haven't necessarily always panned out. In fact, for the New York Giants, our luck, quite often, they don't pan out, unfortunately. Now, I don't think that'll be the case with Evan Neal. I think he does pan out. But here's the question that I want to pose to you, Alex, and to everyone else listening to this. Comment your thoughts on this down below. How short of a leash should Evan Neal have? How long does he have to suck in this 2023 season before the Giants say, okay, time to either put you on the bench or move you inside to guard? Now, how many games do we go through in this regular season before we make that decision, before Brian Dable and his offensive coaching staff make that decision? I think that it's a very worthwhile conversation to have because in the past, let's take Eric Flowers as a prime example. The New York Giants invested a lot in Eric Flowers, right? He was a first-round pick, and they had him play as their left tackle until he literally just could not be on the field anymore. There were so many fans and a lot of analysts who said, it's time to move this guy into guard. What are the Giants waiting for? He can be a good guard. Nevertheless, they never did that. They never went and moved him to guard. He goes to the Miami Dolphins, and I think he played for Washington as well for a little while as a very solid starting guard in the NFL. So go figure, all of the fans who wanted to move him into guard but didn't get their wish, he went to another team and he played as a solid guard. That is the last thing that I want to see happen with Evan Neal, and the only way to mitigate that is to give him a very short leash. If he continues to struggle at that right tackle spot, move him into guard. See what he can do there. He played guard in college. A lot of Giants fans don't seem to realize that. He barely played right tackle in college. He only played that during his freshman season. So those other years that he was at Alabama, one of them, yes, he did play left tackle. That's where he really made a name for himself. But right tackle, he barely played. Guard, he played quite significantly. He had a lot of snaps at the guard position. So you could argue maybe Evan Neal would be more comfortable playing the guard position in the NFL. I don't think so. Again, I think he pans out at right tackle, and I want to see the Giants give him an opportunity to pan out, but I do believe he should have a short leash. I think that, let's say we go through the first 8 weeks of the 2023 season, Alex, and Evan Neal gives up 10 sacks in that time frame. Like he's just putrid again in his sophomore year. I think it's an 8-game short leash. As soon as you get through those 8 games, if he is not better and not showing significant signs of development and growth, I'm taking a chance on moving him to the guard position. But what are your thoughts on that, Alex? How short of a leash should Evan Neal have? And kind of what is your level of confidence in him entering this sophomore season?
I mean, look, we spent the 8th overall draft pick last year, and in my opinion, you give him another full year because you got him for 5 years, right? You got him for 5 years, or 7th overall pick rather. So 5 years of Evan Neal. The mistake we made with Eric Flowers was that we took him from left tackle, put him at right tackle, and then didn't even try him at guard. You know what I mean? And we gave him a couple years at tackle to really struggle and suck. So, in my opinion, you probably take Evan Neal, you give him a full another year. I mean, look, this is a guy that wants to be successful. He really wants to be great, and he'll put in the work. And sometimes, as we've seen, it's more coaching than it is individual players, especially when you have a guy like Evan Neal that was dominant at the college level. That just doesn't go away. Now, he was always going to struggle because he's a little bit bigger, a little bit slower, those speed rushes on the outside, like the Hassan Reddicks of the world, like beat the crap out of him. He's got to be able to get out of that kick stance a little bit faster, maybe reset, whatever's got to be. There's got to be coaches that can help him in that regard, and they're helping him this offseason to kind of improve upon that. But I think you need more of a sample size. I think with a guy like that, if he struggles the first half of the year and then he gets to the bye week, that's when they do a lot of the evaluations, right? Like, what is going on here? What's wrong? What are you doing? We have time to really sit down and figure this thing out. Maybe bring in a specialist. I know, they brought in DeGlugliamo, whatever, a couple years ago, at the midway point to help out, and obviously, didn't result in much. But, the Giants have Bobby Johnson. They have a little bit better of a unit now, a little bit better coaches. They were about average last year in most categories in the offensive line. I still think they were below average in pass blocking, but the run blocking was better. So, Evan Neal, I'm giving him another year. I think that's fair, but after that full year and if he's really struggling and you just can't get it, then you prepare to move him into guard and you do it full time. And then you go into the offseason knowing, okay, we need to go find a right tackle. Whether we have to draft one, whether we have to trade for one, whether we have to sign one, whatever it might be, you're probably going to end up drafting one. In fact, I'll go out on a limb here and say I think the Giants draft a tackle in the mid-rounds this year, and just a developmental guy who maybe has some capabilities inside as well. Someone that they feel, okay, this guy has some upside. We can develop on the back end, like a Matt Pert, like basically replacing Matt Pert's position or at least his roster spot with someone that you can develop, maybe, iron out some kinks, and then hopefully maybe develop into a piece that if you need to have someone that fills in a right tackle, he could be your guy. Right now, we just don't, Tyree Phillips isn't cutting it for me. Matt Pert still, I'm not committed to him anymore. We don't have that much good tackle depth, and we need to have more talent there, in my opinion. So I would not be surprised if we went and spent a mid-round pick on a tackle, just someone that you could develop behind the scenes. But I think that I'm giving Evan Neal a full year to kind of get his bearings and hopefully improve, because he's just still too young. Like, he's like 22 years old. You know what I mean? But then worst case scenario, you kick him into guard. You have a really solid guard there at 23, whatever age he is. I think it's like 22, 23 years old for the next 3 years. You know what I mean? And then you have that position locked down, whether it's left guard, whether it's right guard. And then you have, obviously, hopefully we draft a center in the second round. Maybe you go and get a guy like Tippmann, who has been making some waves, and some other really, really good players as well have been kind of bubbling to the surface the past few weeks. And a lot of people want the Giants to draft the center. Now, I'm not a proponent of drafting centers in the first round. I know it happens. Every now and then it happens, but like traditionally, you can find great centers. Like, the draft isn't only the first round. You know what I mean? You have to be able to find value. You have to be able to find starters in the second, third, and fourth rounds. Those are like I would argue those 3 rounds are far more important than the first round, right? Like, if you can find a starter or two in those rounds, you can get a lot more value than just your first round pick. So, that being said, the Giants need to hit home on some of those picks. They need some of those guys to develop into legitimate starters. Like, of course, you know, people always recall, like, skipping out on Fred Warner and going after, like, BJ Hill. You know what I mean? Like, people always remember that. BJ Hill ended up becoming a solid player. Fred Warner ended up becoming an all-pro player. So you see guys like, you know, we're close there. Like, we're so close to getting some of them, but like, we're one spot away. Like, we just didn't draft this guy. We just missed out on that guy. Eventually, we got to get some luck. Eventually, we got to get lucky with one of those mid-round picks that turns into a legitimate star. We haven't had one of them in a very long time. You know, we legitimately haven't had a mid-round pick pan out to be like an all-pro player or even a Pro Bowl player. And I don't even know how long. All of our best players, like Saquon, Daniel Jones, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, Xavier McKinney, all of them are first-round picks or second round, or like really early second-round picks in McKinney's case. You know what I mean? We can't only have a team composed of starters in the first round. We need to hit on some guys in the mid-rounds, which has been a freaking graveyard for us. So on the offensive line, that's where good teams, good like general managers, good scouting departments, they find those value picks in the mid rounds. We need to be able to get some decent interior guards, some decent, maybe a swing tackle or a starting center in the second round. That's where I'm looking to find those value picks. That's where I'm looking for our actual scouting to like shine and show through, because the last couple of years under Dave Gettleman's tutelage was just a freaking graveyard. And now the coaches definitely impacted them as well, because they were just so bad. So, you know, I will give him a little bit of credit there. There were some good players like Julian Love and whatnot that, you know, ended up being valuable for us in some regard. But last year, I give the Giants a break, because they came in and they didn't, you know, Joe Shane came in, Brian Dibble came in, Brandon Brown came in. They did not have a strategy built for the New York Giants, right? They came in right before the draft, and they were just implementing a strategy based on who they already scouted and who they had information on. But if they had like a strategy built for the Giants, which they had to probably slap together really quickly, it was definitely rushed, and it was definitely not exactly the process they would have liked. But now they have a full off season, right? You got Brandon Brown coming from the Eagles. They know how they're constructing the roster incredibly well. As we can see, the Bills, tremendous roster construction. The Chiefs and Mike Kafka, you know, great roster construction. We're seeing where the value lies. Now the mid rounds is going to be where we have to make some legitimate big money like acquisitions, and they need to start and make big impacts down the road. Now, the injuries last year was a huge blow to this team. A lot of our rookies went down, which is really unfortunate, unpredictable. Just the reality of being a Giants fan is you just have to assume half of your rookies are going to go down for whatever reason. But I'll ask you this, Anthony. Where is your preferred kind of draft location for the center position? I say second round. Use our second round pick on a center. You can find a starter there, and you can find a guy that you can plug and play and kind of forget about it for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, listen, I just think within the first 3 rounds, there's 3 positions that the New York Giants need to address: wide receiver, cornerback, and center. So anywhere in those first 3 rounds, if they take one in round 1, round 2, round 3, I don't care. Just they have to take a center in those first 3 rounds, in my opinion, because it is a huge need for the Giants. I mean, they don't really have one on their roster right now. You know, I guess we could skip over right guard for a second. Mark Lewinsky, we kind of know what he is. We know that he's going to be the starter this year. He's not the best player in the world. He's also not the worst player in the world, though at times he feels like it. But he's going to be the Giants starter at right guard this upcoming season. There's really no room to get out of that contract and make any improvement at right guard. But again, talking about the center position, in yesterday's episode, I did break down a 3-round mock draft from Pro Football Focus in round 2. they landed Luke Weipler with the 57th overall pick, center out of Ohio State University. Now, I said in yesterday's episode, I'm going to say it again, if Luke Weipler is on the board with a 57th overall pick, the Giants are probably turning into Olympic track stars and sprinting to the podium, because he is likely not going to fall that far. But if he does, because he's a center, and centers don't typically go that early in the draft, if he's there at 57, that's the pick for the Giants, because, listen, center is such a huge need for them, and it is a devalued position. It's not a position that goes early. You don't see many centers get drafted in the first round, let alone the second round even. You don't see many centers go there. Usually rounds 3, 4, 5, that's when the centers start coming off the board. I mean, if you guys remember when Creed Humphrey was a player that we all really wanted the Giants to draft, and we wanted him so early in the draft, and he just slid and fell miles and miles down the draft board. I'm pretty sure he was a 6th round pick, or maybe it was someone else, whatever. But there's just so many different instances of centers falling down the board and not getting drafted early. So the 57th overall pick is probably the sweet spot for the New York Giants to go ahead, find their guy, plug and play starter in the middle of their offensive line for this upcoming season. And again, on a rookie deal, so you have him for at least 4 years and then some change if he turns into a solid player. Again, center position, no John Feliciano. Well, who's going to play center this year if you don't draft somebody? Ben Bredesen? Maybe Shane Lemieux? Okay, listen, I like Ben Bredesen. He's a decent player, but I'd much rather him play at left guard so that we don't have to see Shane Lemieux on the field. And Shane Lemieux, I do not trust him at center, let alone left guard or anywhere on the offensive line. He's too injury prone, and when he is on the field, he doesn't necessarily play at a very high level. Again, previewing left guard, we'll dive into that in a second. You mentioned him earlier, Joshua Zito. I also really do like Joshua Zito, and I think that he could be a solid player at left guard for the Giants. I hope he pans out, but right now, I don't necessarily want to be forced into starting Joshua Zito as he enters his second season, because we have to play Ben Bredesen at the center position. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see the Giants get a new player, some new blood in there at that center position who can hopefully be a locked-in starter for years and years to come. So, Alex, do you agree with me? Like, in those first 3 rounds, center has to be addressed between rounds 1 and round 3?
100%. Second round's my preferable kind of spot there. But I'll ask you this, kind of like wrap up the offensive line conversation. Left guard, I'm okay having a position battle there between Ben Bredesen and Josh Ezeudu. Like, I'm cool with that. You can't address every single position in one offseason. We know this. The Giants are already still looking for wide receivers, as a report indicated that Anthony wrote this morning. And, the Giants have already tried to plug a couple other spots. The draft is going to be the big one to build out the rest of this roster. So I would say center's definitely getting some support. I would not be surprised if tackle got a little bit of support in the mid rounds. And I would not be surprised if maybe they got maybe a tackle that could also transition to guard. I don't really, honestly, I just don't know. But left guard, I'm cool with Ben Bredesen. And, it's tough because I also don't trust Mark Lewinsky for shit, for what it's worth. Like, now that I think about it, I really just don't trust Mark Lewinsky. He was never supposed to be a long-term solution. I think he was just the best we could get at the price point that we could get him at. We just had no money last year. We needed a guard. So I think they're just going to ride out the rest of that contract. I think we can't cut him because we'd have to pay to actually cut him. We wouldn't save any money at all. So he's probably starting at right guard. I wouldn't be surprised if they draft a center, hope the best for Evan Neal, Ben Bredesen versus Shane Lemieux maybe still remains in the mix, maybe gets cut after training camp, depending on how he performs, if he's even healthy for what it's worth. But maybe it's Ben Bredesen, Shane Lemieux, and Josh Ezeudu competing at left guard, and then right guard's Mark Lewinsky kind of has it locked down for now. But for what it's worth, I would love improvements at both guard positions. I'm confident in Josh Ezeudu, and Ben Bredesen was pretty solid when he was on the field last year. I actually really liked what I saw from him. But we do need improvements. And mostly we need guys to just get better. We need Josh Ezeudu to get better. We need Evan Neal to get better. If those two guys get better and lock down the starting jobs, we're going to feel a lot more confident in our offensive line. So, while we do need to add talent, we just need guys to improve this offseason in following into their sophomore campaign. So I feel like that might be the priority.
And I'll say on top of that, kind of building on that point, yes, we need these guys to get better, continue developing, continue growing. We also need these guys to be healthy. Not only be better, but be healthy, because that was a huge problem on the Giants' offensive line last year. Like, we could have seen a totally different unit up front in front of Daniel Jones if it wasn't for all of those injuries. Because, take a look at Shane Lemieux, for example. He was projected to be the day one starter at left guard. He didn't play at all in the regular season. And then, after he got injured, Ben Bredesen was supposed to take over. He barely played in the regular season. We got through so many different players. Nick Gates ended up being a starter on the offensive line once again. He was never meant to start. The Giants had so many injuries last year. We talk about it all the time. They had a lot of injuries in the secondary, had a lot of injuries at the wide receiver position. We don't talk enough about how many injuries they endured at the offensive line positions, because because those were really crucial, like critically damning for the Giants offensive line, the injuries that they sustained there. So yes, these players do need to be better. But and another player that I mentioned, I think his name is Marcus McKethan, the mid-round pick. He was also injured, missed the entire season. UNC tackle guard prospect. So just think about how many offensive linemen we didn't get to see last year. This Giants offensive line potentially could have been a lot better than it was if we were healthier. But when you look at how many injuries they sustained, it just wasn't even possible for this to be a competent unit. So hopefully in this upcoming season, yes, I want to see them add some talent to the center position in the first 3 rounds of the draft. I'd also like to see them take a shot on some more mid-round guards and tackle prospects, see if any of these guys can potentially steal a spot in training camp, especially at that left guard spot. I still personally feel like that left guard position is wide open. I agree with you. I really like Joshua Zito. I do think Ben Bredesen ends up being the starter there, but that doesn't mean that either of those players are preventing me from drafting a solid guard in the middle rounds if I see one, right? I want to hopefully see the Giants take a chance on some of these developmental guys, watch them grow, and maybe one of them could take the starting job. But Joshua Zito is my dream scenario there. I pray that he ends up winning that spot from Ben Bredesen. I want to see this young UNC mauler take over and be the solid prospect that we know he could be, but we'll see. It'll all be really interesting to see how that unfolds. But before we wrap up, Alex, expectations for the left tackle spot. We've covered the other 4 positions. Andrew Thomas, All-Pro, second-team All-Pro in 2022. I mean, just one of the best players in the NFL. Do you expect him to maintain this pace, or do you think he can get even better? I personally think he can get better. He's still so young. Like, we all talk about Andrew Thomas as being so amazing, and we fail to realize he's only in his 3rd season. He's going into his 4th year in the NFL. He has not hit his ceiling yet. Like, he's about to get that big contract extension, be the highest paid offensive tackle in history. Yes, of course. But I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet. And I actually do think that this year he could establish himself as the bona fide number 1 tackle in the NFL.
I mean, of course, there's always room for improvement. And the only thing that I can really pinpoint is there was a 3-game kind of sequence, week 12 to week 14, Dallas, Washington, Philadelphia, where he gave up a sack in each one of those games, 7 total pressures. I believe that he was sick for some of those. I think the first 2, I think he was sick against Dallas and Washington, but he played anyway. And of course, you got Micah Parsons, and then you got Reddick and whoever else the Eagles sign on a daily basis to help their defensive front. I think Sweat is on Washington. Obviously Chase Young, but I don't know if he was playing yet. So the only thing I could say for Andrew Thomas is just a clean slate. Like, he's so good. There's not much. I don't want him to improve on anything. I just want him to keep being consistent. And, if he could finish a season without those like little stretch of sacks or stretch of pressures, then you're good to go. I mean, in 2021, he played 800 snaps, which is the lowest actually in his career. He played almost 1,200 last year. He gave up 2 sacks. I mean, look, you have a player that's fighting through those ankle injuries. He only gave up 2 penalties last season. Can he get better? Sure, but I think it's marginal. I think he's already like pretty damn freaking good. I don't think that he could get much better than he is right now because, like we've been saying, he's one of the best, if not going to be the best left tackle in football. And you pay guys like that, I mean, look what the Eagles just did. They gave Lane Johnson like $34 million for next season or something crazy like that, and he's like 50 years old. So Andrew Thomas is going to get freaking paid. He deserves it, and he's a freaking monster, and without him, we would be in shambles. Think about our offense and how weak it already was. Think about it without him. So, him healthy helps us a lot, helps the running game. If Evan Neal takes a big step forward, we're going to see this offense take a really big step forward. And I'm excited to see that. But yes, I do believe that you can marginally get better, but he's already so great. I just want him to be consistently at this level right now for the rest of his career.
So do I. I mean, if you got that, you've got one of the best tackles in the NFL for a very long time, pairing with hopefully a quarterback who continues to grow and develop and live up to the $160 million price tag that the Giants placed on him in Daniel Jones. But again, this offensive line, it does concern me quite a bit. We've talked about pretty much every single one of these positions, why we have confidence in some of them, and why we have zero confidence in others. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Giants do between now and the start of the regular season. We know that, of course, training camp's going to happen. There's going to be some surprising waiver wire claims potentially. The Giants might be able to find some talent there during the preseason, but really the main focus right now is on the 2023 NFL draft. I'm hoping to see the Giants draft a center, address that position, and build out this offensive line. And of course, we're going to keep you updated on any centers that the Giants might be looking at and any players that they're going to be drafting right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Comment your thoughts on the topic down below, and we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
aggressive.